Hello, I am an INTP, and that's what this video is about. So to begin, what is an INTP? You may be familiar with this term if you know about the Myers-Briggs type indicator, and you may think that I am someone who has scored as an INTP on this test, and you would be wrong. That is not what I mean by INTP. Actually, when I took the Myers-Briggs type indicator, I originally scored as an INTJ. And when I've taken it again, I think I scored as an ISFJ. But through my understanding of the psychological types that this test is trying to determine what you are, I determined that I am an INTP. So first of all, let me make it clear that an INTP is not how you score on a test. The idea of an INTP came before the test. The test is just an imperfect tool for determining whether you for determining what you might be. The idea of an INTP originates with Carl Jung. Carl Jung came up with the idea of 8 personality types. And these personality types were distinguished by a dominant function and a direction for that dominant function. So the 4 functions were thinking, feeling, intuition, and sensing. And each of these could be used in an extroverted way or an introverted way. And so Jung came up with 8 personality types based on these 4 functions and 2 directions. And each of personality type also had 2 subtypes. If in my case you are an introvert, you would have a secondary function which was an extroverted function. So your dominant function would be an introverted one. Your secondary function or auxiliary function would be an extroverted one. And if your dominant one was a judging function, which are thinking or feeling, your auxiliary one would be a perceiving function, which would be sensing or intuition. So the INTP corresponds to what Jung was calling an introverted thinking type, with intuition as its auxiliary. Now, the way that INTP came to mean that is that the test tests for 4 sets of preferences, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, whether you're an intuitive or a sensing type. This is to determine which perceiving function you prefer. Then whether you're a thinking type or a feeling type, which is to determine which judging function you prefer. And then whether you're a perceiving type or a judging type. And this refers to whether you are someone who prefers perceiving or judging when extroverting. So if you're a perceiving type on the Myers-Briggs type indicator, you're supposed to be someone whose preferred extroverted function is a perceiving function. So what does that mean for an INTP? An INTP, first of all, is an introvert. That's what the I means. Then an INTP is an intuitive. That's what the N means. N is used for intuitive because I has already been taken. And then an INTP is a thinking type. So it prefers thinking over feeling. And finally, an INTP is a perceiving type, which means that the INTP prefers a perceiving function for extroverting. In this case, the dominant function of the INTP is a judging function, which is thinking. But what is preferred for extroverting is intuition, which is a perceiving function. So that's how INTP corresponds to what Jung is calling an introverted thinker with intuition as an auxiliary. Now, if you're familiar with socionics, socionics will use the same terms as the Myers-Briggs type indicator, but it uses J and P differently. Socionics means by J that your dominant function is a judging one, and or by P that your dominant function is a perceiving one. So In socionics, the same type that Myers-Briggs calls an INTP is there called an INTJ. And they will put the J or P in lowercase to distinguish it from the Myers-Briggs type, which is normally written in all uppercase. Okay, so I'm an INTP on Myers-Briggs, though I didn't score as one on Myers-Briggs, because it's not just about the test, it's about what you actually are. The test is just a way to figure out what you are. And at socionics, I'm an INTJ, or also what's called an LII, which means logical, intuitive, intraterm or something. I'm not looking it up right now. So I'm an LII or an INTJ on socionics, an INTP Myers-Briggs. Okay, let me get into what this is all about here. First of all, introversion versus extroversion. An introvert is someone who likes to spend more time alone. An extrovert is someone who likes to spend time with other people. But there's more to it than that. Introverts are more sensitive to stimulation. And here I'm actually getting into what I think says about introverts versus extroverts, but I think it's still relevant. Introverts, according to ISync, are more sensitive to stimulation. And extroverts are less sensitive to stimulation. And so, given the same amount of stimulation, let's say a moderate amount, an introvert might want to retreat from that stimulation in order to become less stimulated. And an extrovert might seek out more stimulation in order to feel as much stimulation as the extrovert needs to. So introverts may go more for quieter, more relaxing environments. Extroverts may go for more exciting environments, more exciting activities, talking to lots of people because that gives them more stimulation. Introverts may want to retreat from people because that gives them less stimulation. And it's more or less having to do with how you react to stimulation. I can be very sensitive to stimulation. And an extrovert may need to seek out greater stimulation than I would be comfortable with because he doesn't feel as much stimulation as I do in the same circumstances. Okay, other things about introverts and extroverts. The general idea in Myers-Briggs is that introverts get their energy from within, extroverts get their energy from without, from other people. This seems sort of silly to me, and I'm not sure I really agree with this. Energy comes from eating food, getting enough rest, and certain activities may drain your energy more than others. The kinds of activities that extroverts enjoy may be more draining of energy for an introvert. And activities that introverts prefer may be more draining for extroverts because they may need more stimulation in order to utilize their energy better. Maybe. So I'm really not sure about this idea that you get your energy from within or from without. I think I get my energy from calories. Okay, but anyway, the real significance of introversion or extroversion is what your dominant function is. For an introvert, the dominant function is an introverted one. And for an extrovert, the dominant function is an extroverted one. For the INTP, the dominant function is introverted thinking. And so let me start with that. Introverted thinking has to, well, it involves thinking, it involves logic. But more or less doing it on your own instead of out in the world. And here are some differences between introverted thinking and extroverted thinking. Well, introverted thinking is more about understanding how something works as a whole. And extroverted thinking can be more about laying down premises, drawing logical conclusions from them, and showing that because you have this and this and this, then this is true, and so on. And extrovert thinking is also going to be working more with coming up with principles through induction and using those principles to conclude other things through deduction. So extrovert thinking is focusing a lot on induction and deduction. And because it focuses on induction, it can sometimes miss things. You can use extrovert thinking to come up with principles that seem correct but aren't actually correct because you didn't have enough evidence or data, but that's a conclusion you drew. You came up with a principle on incomplete data and you're using it as though it's true and then coming up with false conclusions. So that's one way that extroverted thinking can go wrong. Introverted thinking, as I said, is more about understanding how things work as a whole. And this can be in terms of understanding how physical things work, like how the body works, or how a clock works, or how a machine like a motorcycle or a gun or something works. And it can also be about understanding how theories work. Like, I understand the theory of evolution very well, and I know how that works, and I can use it to understand many things about how the world works. Now, whether an introvert thinker tends to understand how mechanical things work or how theories work depends upon whether he prefers sensing or intuition. And this is not clear cut. It's not you either prefer you're either into theories or you're either into mechanical things, but there's a gray area gradient. But if you're a sensing type and an introvert thinker, like you're an ISTP, then you may be more inclined to understand how mechanical things work. ISTPs are supposed to be very much interested in understanding how their various tools work, mastering their tools, like a musician might want to master a musical instrument. Or someone might be very much into guns or cars or something and understand the intricate details of how that works. And if you're an intuitive, like the INTP, then you'd be more inclined to understand how theories work. But, I should add that INTPs can understand mechanics of things and ISTPs can understand theories. It's more about a preference one way or the other, what you tend to focus on. And, as an INTP, I do have some tendency to focus on theories, but I'm also into computer programming, and, I have to understand the mechanics of how certain programming languages operate. So, there's that. And let me get over to extroverted intuition. INTPs use intuition in an extroverted way. And this often involves looking out at the environment and using intuition to understand what's happening in your environment. So instead of paying attention to particular details in the environment, you get more of a sense of how things are going in general. You're looking more at the forest instead of the trees. And what are some of the differences between extroverted intuition and introverted intuition? Introverted intuition tends to be more private. It tends to focus on particular concepts and ideas. And extroverted intuition it can seem sort of random. It's affected by things in the environment. You see something in the environment, and it can trigger an idea. So that's how introverted. Like when I've been in classrooms as a student, I would often just say things off the cuff because I would just get ideas through my extrovert intuition, and since that was at work, I was comfortable speaking out and saying various things. An introverted intuitive might not be so inclined to just say things off the cuff in a classroom setting. But an extroverted intuitive probably would, as I was doing. Okay, now besides the dominant function and the auxiliary function, there are the other two functions. We have sensing and feeling for the INTP. And if one perceiving function is used for extroverting, the other one would be used for introverting. So an INTP also favors introverted sensing over extroverted sensing, and this is the INTP's tertiary function. So the difference between introverted sensing and extroverted sensing. Introverted sensing can focus more on your memories, on your memories of various sense experiences, what you learned in the past. Also on your phenomenological experience of the world, what it's like to be you, what it's like to feel something. It's focusing more on the experience of your sensations than it is on the content of your sensations. Extroverted sensations can be focusing more, I think, on the content of your sensations. It's to be focusing on what your five senses are telling you right now in the present. And introverted sensing will be more about what it feels like to have certain sensations. They're not in the sense of feeling, which I'll be getting to next. So focusing on introverted sensing, I may focus on the beauty of a piece of music or how much I enjoy listening to the music instead of on what notes are being played or what the lyrics to the song are. I mean, those are things that are harder for me to pay attention to. I can listen to a song many times and not realize what the lyrics are saying. One example that comes to mind recently is the song Call Me Maybe, in which she talks about trading her soul for a wish. And that sounds sort of like selling her soul to the devil or whatever. But I listened to that song many times. I never picked up on that. I just enjoyed the experience of listening to the song. I liked it. So there's that. And okay, memories. One thing I can do, I can scan things and notice something that's just out of place. Okay, I can remember lots of passwords. That's pretty easy for me to do. Also, introverted sensing has to do with your awareness of your body. And I'm fairly aware of what's going on in my body. I can be aware of when I'm thirsty. I have a good sense of thirst. And when things are going on around my body, I can take action to, sometimes I can tell when a cramp is going to start and adjust my behavior so I don't get a cramp. Okay, now moving on to feeling. Since thinking is what is dominant for an INTP, feeling is what's going to be the least preferred function for the INTP. So an INTP has inferior extroverted feeling. And this can be contrasted with introverted feeling. Extroverted feeling is more about empathy, about being aware of other people's feelings, about how you should behave towards other people, about how your actions might affect other people. And introverted feeling is about being aware of your values, about how you feel about various things, about what's going on inside of you internally. And while both of these are going to be weak in an INTP, since it's a dominant thinking type, the extroverted feeling can be more active in the INTP. Since, thinking, it tends to be used for introverting the other judging function. Feeling will be used for extroverting. And sometimes this can lead an INTP to have very strong feelings. Sometimes in the past, I've fallen in love at first sight, or not too long after meeting a woman. And feelings can get out of hand for an INTP. They don't know how to control them. Through experience, I've learned how to control my feelings to some extent, but it's still not the same as someone who has a greater preference for feeling. So, although the INTP mainly focuses on introverted thinking, extroverted intuition, introverted sensing, and extroverted feeling, the other 4 functions used in the opposite directions are also available to the INTP. Sometimes I can use introverted intuition, for example. I meditate, I get ideas by sleeping on things. These seem to be examples of introverted intuition, which comes about not through stimulation from the environment, but by decreasing stimulation from the environment, going inward and letting the mind come up with something. I can do that too. Introverted feeling, I've developed to some degree. I can be aware of my values, sometimes of what I'm feeling. Now, one thing about being an INTP is, I'm not always aware of what my feelings are about something. I'm not always focused on my feelings. I tend to be more focused on what's going on in my mind. And let's see. Extroverted sensing, extroverted sensing tends to be very now-oriented, as opposed to introverted sensing, which can be very past-oriented. But, I can be very now-oriented from time to time. When I listen to music, I tend to listen to it in the moment. I listen to lots of dance music, which I enjoy. And, it seems to me that that might be appealing more to extroverted sensing than to introverted sensing. But it's something I do enjoy. And then we get to extroverted thinking. And I am very good at logic. I got an A in symbolic logic. I was tutoring the students in my class while I was taking symbolic logic, and I've taught symbolic logic myself. And I've been making videos on symbolic logic. It's just that introverted thinking tends to focus more on understanding how everything works together as a whole, how all the pieces fit together, not simply on deducing things through logic or inducing things inductively. Okay, so I've talked about the functions here, and some other things to talk about are how I'm creative, for example. I can be very inventive. I have invented various things. I recently made a video about how to make something that you can use as a kettlebell or as a leg weight. I invented that recently. I've invented other exercise equipment that I use to exercise. I often invent games. Let me show you one of my tools since it just happens to be here. Zillions of games. This came about in 1998, and I got a hold of that, and I started creating chess variants with it. And later on, I created something called Game Courier, which is a website you can go to online and play games online. And I've programmed some of my own games for you to be able to play online. So one thing I do, here's how my creativity works. Like, I will get an idea through intuition, and an idea for a game. And then I'll use my thinking to figure out how can I make that game work. For example, I once got the idea of making a British version of chess. And I thought to myself, well, what would make a game of chess British? So I thought, I want to include the heraldic animals in the game. The lion, the unicorn, and the dragon. The lion is for England, the unicorn is for Scotland, and the dragon is for Wales. And I thought since the current monarch of Britain is a queen, I would make the queen the royal piece in the game. And so, I got some ideas for the game, but I had to sit on it for a while until I figured out how to do it. Other times I use my thinking to figure out how to program a game. I have the rules set before me, and I want to figure out just how I should code it to program all the rules. And sometimes the language I'm using to program the game puts restrictions on the game as I'm creating it. For example, I wanted to create a two-player version. Sorry, not a two-player. That's pretty redundant since most chess games are two-player. But a two-move version of chess. A double-move version where you could make 2 moves per turn. And there were already other double-move versions of chess that had already been made. But these could not be programmed perfectly on zillions of games. So I decided to come up with a set of rules that could be programmed on zillions of games. I called it extra move chess. And I did that. So that's how my thinking and intuition can work together creatively. They can also work together to understand theories. Sometimes I use my sensing to design the games that I create. Create graphic images for them. And now, let me get back to feeling here. Sometimes I'm not so in touch with my feeling. Some things I do to get in more touch with my feeling would be to listen to music or to watch dramas. Seeing something emotional happening to someone on the screen can help me get in touch with similar emotions to myself more easily than going through those experiences. Or at least I'm not going to be manipulating my life to put myself through various experiences. So it's easier to just watch a drama and feel what other people are feeling and experience feelings that way, sort of vicariously. That's, I guess, sort of a way that extroverted feeling can work, particularly when it's weak, like it is in the INTP. Okay, there are probably more things to cover about being an INTP, but perhaps this video has gone on long enough. I don't really see a timer here, so I don't know how long it's gone on, but it feels like it's been going on for a while. So thank you for watching, and I will stop now.